Culture is a current we have to swim against. What's up, 316 fam? Welcome to another edition of Pastor's Corner. Pastor Stephanie here, Pastor Cam here. You can call us Cam and Steph. We are so glad to just be with you and just have time for a conversation. I want to start off by reading Matthew 5, and I want to refresh our hearts and our minds on the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes. Steph, would you read Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 3, and we'll go on maybe to verse 9 or so.
Sure. So Matthew 5:3, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
And so here we have this scene that Jesus is sitting down on a mountain, he's teaching his disciples, and there's thousands of men, not to include how many women are there. I mean, so we're talking about thousands of people, and they're wanting to hear the message of the gospel. And Jesus starts off by who's blessed. And who he says is blessed is not what you would consider blessed by culture standards. And so it puts this question that Jesus is setting a standard, what is the kingdom? And that the kingdom is often in attention with today's culture.
Yeah. The culture of the kingdom is very different than any culture that we see on earth. I'm reminded of the story in Matthew 21 when Jesus rides into town on a donkey. And up until this point in Matthew 21, Jesus had intentionally stayed under the radar. He had lived most of his life in obscurity, really moving silently. But in Matthew 21, where he rides into the town on a donkey, he's actually going radically public. King David and King Solomon both had rode into town on a donkey on that very same road, on their way to their public coronation as king. So for Jesus to come that way, it was a very radical act. Because it was even a confrontive act. It was a prophetic act in every sense of the word, but he's going public and he's not being shy about declaring himself as king anymore. But the interesting thing about it that is so counterculture to the way we understand everything, even to the way we understand power, is that he wasn't using the powers that be, Caesar, any person of influence who might have that would possibly be to his benefit. He had no interest of using them. He did not go in through any political way. He wasn't even interested in going that route. He declared himself as king by riding in on a donkey. And I think that's so interesting because in our day and in our culture, there's a lot of argument. There's a lot of fighting, even within the church, about what God is doing, about what's going on politically and all these things. And it's just, I find it fascinating that Jesus wasn't even interested in using a person of influence or the powers that be to do anything with his agenda. He didn't need any of that. He wasn't interested in using any of that. And so it's almost like we're going to be missing a lot of what heaven is doing if we have our eyes fixed on the culture around us.
And it's so easy, you're right, having our eyes fixed. It's so easy to get caught up in what the culture is doing. And it's around us, it's everything. It's so easy to go with the masses on culture. It's easy, even when my emotional and my feelings get involved. I'm like, yeah, like that's right. But the kingdom of heaven is counterculture. And when he's talking about blessed are those, and he's talking about the merciful, and blessed is the poor in the spirit, blessed is this, and blessed is this person, it's really turning whatever the culture thinks blessed. The culture thinks, man, blessed are people who are rich, blessed are people who are well off, blessed are people who are in high positions. And he's saying, blessed are the lowly, blessed are the most. He's turning the whole world upside down. And he's turning everything around, and it be what we get the word counterculture, or where we talk about that statement that it's swimming against the grain. I'm often reminded that in the book of Acts 17:6, Jason brought the disciples into his household, and the people around him got frustrated and mad at him, and they said that Jason has brought, here's what he says, these men who have turned the whole world upside down have come here. Literally what the King James Version says, they have turned the whole world upside down. When you start operating the kingdom and start going in counterculture,
really
you begin to think different, you begin to act different, look different, and you cannot be boxed in by today's culture or the days of the time, because the kingdom of heaven outlives the culture of today.
Yeah. And how much more if we get rooted in the culture of heaven? How much more if our eyes are fixed on heaven? How much more if we are listening to what the Father is doing and doing what we see the Father doing? How much more then are we unshaken when everything shakes? Like, that's just so good. So
I
fast.
love that quote when you preached in July and you talked about, when we get our eyes fixed on the culture. What was it what you said when you said that? When you get our eyes, the more we have our eyes fixed on the culture, the less we,
I think I just said, the more our eyes are fixed on the culture around us, the further and further we are away from Jesus. And what I mean is, we get the further, because if you think about it again in reference to the story in Matthew 21, like, we would assume that the magic or the movement of God would be in the loud places that we can see. We would assume to look to the public places, to what's on the news. We would assume to look to the loud ones, right? To the ones out there being the noisiest. But the movement of heaven in this scene in Matthew 21 was on a quiet road with a man sitting on a donkey, while Caesar and his chariots and his power and his servants and his horses were somewhere afar off. And so, we just move further and further away from what heaven is actually doing when we have our eyes fixed on the culture.
That was such a powerful statement, and one that I'll try to memorize and remember forever, but it's one that really wrecked my heart. It's that we often, not often, but we have to constantly remind ourselves, I can't go with the grain. I have to swim against the grain. For the culture is something that we constantly have to swim against. It's a current that we often have to swim against. Yeah. And it's that every day, man. Like, man, no, I'm part of the kingdom. I'm not part of the culture. I'm not part of this political party. I'm not part of this political party. I represent the kingdom. I'm an ambassador, and I'm a witness of Jesus' kingdom. That's who I am. And we have a different way about going about things, and we look at things differently.
Yeah.
So, think about that today. Man, are you swimming with the current of the culture, or are you one who's looking at the culture and you're saying, man, that's a current that I have to swim against? Well, this is where a conversation begins and not where one ends. Till next time. Peace.
Peace.